On a Thursday night in late October of 2025, in a tired little town in central Texas, the kind of town where the neon signs buzz louder than the conversations inside, a 47-year-old waitress named Patty stood behind the counter of a nearly empty diner and stared at the stain on the floor that would not come out. The clock above the coffee pots read 10:37 p.m., but for Patty, it felt like 3 a.m. in her bones. Her feet burned inside cheap black sneakers. Her lower back throbbed in dull waves from 12 hours of carrying heavy trays and bending over sticky tables. Her eyes were dry, her throat raw from saying the same words 100 times a day. Refill? Anything else? Have a blessed night. The smell of burnt coffee, old fryer oil and lemon cleaner clung to her uniform and hair like a second skin. Outside, a big pickup truck rolled past on Main Street, its bass thumping, then faded into the distance. The neon sign that once proudly said Jack's Family Diner since 1954 now flickered between Jack's Famil and Axe Din, casting sickly red light through the front windows. It wasn't really Jack's anymore. The original Jack had opened it in the 1950s, passed it to his son in the 1980s. Patty had started here when she was 20, just needing a job. Back then, the booths were full, the jukebox worked, and truckers tipped in fat, crumpled 20s. Now, in 2025, a chain burger place and a shiny coffee franchise had opened near the highway, stealing the young crowd. The factory outside of town had laid off half its workers. The diner survived mostly on lonely regulars, old men with social security checks, and a few travelers who took the wrong exit. Patty wiped the same clean spot on the counter for the third time, just to feel like she was doing something. The rag smelled of bleach and old coffee. She glanced at the worn brown envelope tucked under the cracked plastic napkin dispenser. This week's tips. She had been counting them in her head all night. $38.75. That was it. That was all that was left after paying rent late, after buying just enough groceries for the week and gas to get to the diner and back. Her rent was 4 months behind. 4. Her landlord, Mr. Barnes, an old friend of her late father, had given her grace and then more grace, but earlier that afternoon he had come by the diner in person. She could still hear his voice, low and heavy, as he sat in booth 3 with his hat in his hands. "Patty," he had said, looking down at the table instead of into her tired hazel eyes, "I've stretched as far as I can. You're at $4,800 behind. I got to give you until tomorrow. Tomorrow, 6 p.m. If you don't have at least half, I got to start the eviction process. Bank's on my back too." Her stomach had dropped so fast she felt dizzy. She had forced herself to smile weakly and say, "I understand, Mr. Barnes. You've been more than kind." But inside, her heart had clenched. $4,800. She didn't even have 48 to her name. Now she looked at the envelope again. $38.75. Her last tips. The last little bit, standing between her and absolute empty. At home, in the small 2-bedroom apartment that still smelled faintly of her children's shampoo and cheap laundry detergent, there were 2 bedrooms that had not changed in almost a year. Her son Danny, 17, and her daughter Sophie, 15, had once filled those rooms with laughter, music, and teenage arguments about nothing and everything. But they weren't there anymore. Almost a year ago to the day, her ex-husband, Rick, had come by with a woman in a shiny SUV. An HR manager at the big plant outside of town, he had always dressed in ironed shirts and talked about moving up. He had walked into the diner back then too, slid into a booth and waited for her break. He had left on the table a folded napkin with words that burned into her memory as clearly as if they'd been carved into stone. "I've waited 20 years for you to get your life together. The kids deserve better than your lack of progress." He had taken them, Danny with his guitar, Sophie with her sketchbooks, and moved them into a nicer part of town, into a townhouse with a manicured lawn and a private Christian school logo on the bumper of his car. He had told everyone I had to get them out of that environment. She works nights, never home. It's not stable. Neighbors had whispered. Church ladies had murmured half-whispered prayers with judgment tucked inside. The WhatsApp group she had for the three of them still showed one grey check on most of her messages. Sent, not delivered, not read. She sometimes typed long paragraphs to them late at night, then erased them, leaving the chat as empty as her heart. Once in a while, a short reply came. Busy, Mom. Maybe another time. Dad says we can't come this weekend. Got practice. Those little grey checks and short, cold messages hurt more than any unpaid bill. Não sabia que o silêncio de filho podia doer mais do que qualquer grito. In the quiet diner, the radio sat on a shelf near the coffee pots, an old boxy thing with a cracked speaker that sometimes caught a gospel station when the weather was right. Tonight, it only hissed static. Patty had tried to adjust the antenna earlier, but it barely helped. The silence felt heavier. She poured herself a small cup of coffee from the bottom of the pot. It was burnt, bitter, and strong. She took it black. She couldn't afford sugar at the diner. She saved what she could to bring home for the next morning. The hot liquid burned her tongue, but the pain helped her stay awake. Her morning routine had become a ritual of survival. Wake up alone before sunrise. Stand in the chilly bathroom where the small water heater had died 3 months ago, and step into an icy shower that made her gasp. The cold water ran over her shoulders and down her back as she hugged herself and whispered, "Just one more day, Lord. Help me get through one more day." Some mornings she didn't even know if she believed anyone was listening. She would then move through the quiet apartment, passing Danny's room, his posters on the wall, his football jersey still hanging on the back of a chair. The bed, made exactly as he had left it the last weekend he had stayed with her, before Rick had decided visits weren't in the kids' best interest. Sophie's room still smelled faintly of cheap perfume and art supplies. Her sketches were taped to the wall, girls with angel wings, city skylines, eyes that looked far away. Patty hadn't touched anything. She couldn't. It felt like if she changed anything, it would mean accepting they weren't coming back. Now, back in the diner, she glanced toward the corner booth by the window, the one Danny used to claim when he came in after school. She could almost see him there, hunched over his phone, earbuds in, a plate of fries disappearing faster than she could refill the ketchup. She swallowed hard. The bell above the door chimed weakly as it opened. Patty straightened up instinctively, forcing her face into something like a smile, wiping her hands on her apron. But it was just old Mr. Harris, a retired truck driver who came in every Thursday night for decaf and pie. He waved tiredly, slid into his usual booth, and she moved on autopilot. Coffee, 1 cream, no sugar, pumpkin pie warmed up 30 seconds, whipped topping. He left a $1 tip under the mug. She thanked him like it was 100. By 10:55 p.m., the diner was almost empty. One table near the back held a young couple sharing fries and staring at their phones. The fryer hummed. The ventilation fan rattled. The clock ticked too loudly. Patty's head buzzed with numbers. $38.75. Rent due tomorrow. Electricity bill red-stamped final notice. An almost empty fridge at home. She leaned on the counter and, without meaning to, lifted her eyes toward the yellowed ceiling tiles. They were stained with years of cigarette smoke from before the ban, years of grease that somehow floated up, years of Texas storms that had leaked through the roof. She stared at those stains, as if they were clouds and she was 12 again, lying in a field looking for shapes. Her throat tightened. The words came out in a hoarse whisper. God, if you exist, if you're really there, what more do I have to lose talking to you? Her fingers gripped the edge of the counter until her knuckles turned white. Tears burned at the corners of her eyes, but she blinked them back. The young couple in the booth laughed at something on their phones. The world kept spinning like nothing was breaking inside her. "I'm tired," she murmured, almost too soft to hear even for herself. "I am so tired. I've given my whole life serving, carrying plates and smiling and listening. I've tried to be good. I know I've failed in a lot of ways, but I'm drowning here." She glanced at the envelope again. "I got $38.75 left. That's it. No savings, no second job, no plan. Rent's past due. Tomorrow they're gonna throw me out. My kids barely talk to me. My husband left with some manager and a note on a napkin telling me I'm not enough. God, if you're out there, if you see me, do you care? Can you even hear the prayer of a tired waitress in a dying diner in a town nobody cares about?" Her voice cracked on the last words. She looked toward the front windows, where the neon sign flickered, casting red and blue shadows across the empty seats. For a moment, the reflection of her own face looked like someone else's, a woman older than she felt, with deep lines around her mouth and eyes, with hair pulled back too tight to hide the gray. "No sabia que uma alma podia se sentir velha enquanto o corpo ainda caminhava." The bell over the door jingled again. The couple by the window glanced up, wrinkled their noses softly, traded a quick look, and then went back to their phones. Patty wiped at her eyes quickly with the back of her hand, turned and froze. He stood just inside the doorway, illuminated by the dull neon glow and the harsh overhead fluorescent lights. At first glance, he looked like every homeless man she'd ever seen drift down Main Street, maybe 50, maybe 60, maybe older. His hair was long, tangled and dirty, hanging in matted ropes down past his shoulders. In some places, crusts of what looked like dried sauce or food clung to strands. His beard was full and wild, brown streaked with grey, with crumbs caught in it, stained darker in spots. The smell hit her before he took 3 steps. It was the stench of weeks, maybe months on the street. Sweat soaked into every layer of clothing, stale urine, dirt, cigarette smoke, old food, and something sour underneath it all. For a second, her stomach turned. He wore a faded grey shirt, so stained that its original colour was a mystery, the fabric dark with grease patches and grime. The sleeves were frayed, one cuff torn. His pants were ripped at the knees, threads dangling, smeared with dirt and what looked like dried mud. His shoes. They were not really shoes anymore. They were once brown leather, now cracked so badly the toes showed through, soles separating, laces missing. His feet shuffled as he walked, and each step seemed heavier than the last. But his eyes did not match the rest. They were deep brown, clear and intense, with a softness that didn't fit his rough appearance. There was something like sadness there, and something like understanding, like he had seen more than this small town's gossip, and more than this diner's peeling paint. He stepped closer to the counter, hesitant, as if expecting to be turned away. Patty could feel the eyes of the young couple on them, saw in her peripheral vision how they shifted in their seats, leaning away, fingers hovering over their phones, maybe ready to record or to complain. The man cleared his throat gently. His voice, when it came, was low and rough, carrying the weight of gravel and road dust. "Ma'am," he said, looking not at her name tag but into her face. I'm sorry to bother you this late." Patty straightened, wiping her hands again, forcing the weary kindness she had lived on for decades. "You're not bothering me," she said. "We're open till 11. He nodded slowly, eyes dropping, hands twisting together in front of him, fingers black under the nails. "I haven't eaten a real meal in a couple of days," he said. "They ran me off from the place down by the highway, said I was bad for business." The words stung more than he knew. Patty had watched over the months as the new shiny places turned people like him away, with polite smiles and locked doors. He took a breath, his chest rising under the dirty shirt. "I understand if you can't, but do you think maybe you could spare a plate of something hot? I got nothing." Patty felt every pair of eyes in the diner on them, even though there were only 3 other humans inside. The couple in the booth. The cook in the back, Mario, who paused at the pass-through window and stared. Her mind flashed to the envelope under the napkin dispenser, $38.75. Her last tips, her last money, her last thin wall between her and absolute empty. She also thought of how the manager from the chain burger place had once told her in the grocery line, "We don't let them hang around. Guests don't like it. They smell. They scare folks." Patty swallowed. Behind the exhaustion, something else stirred, something that had been planted in her years ago in Sunday school, when Miss Linda had made them memorize Bible verses about feeding the hungry and clothing the naked. She remembered a verse, not clearly, but like a song half forgotten. "What you did to the least of these." She looked at the man. Really looked. There was a tremble in his hands. His lips were dry and cracked. There were lines around his eyes that spoke of deep laughter once, before the streets carved new ones of sorrow. Her heart clenched. Could be me in a few months, she thought. If I lose the apartment, if the diner closes, if my body gives out. Não sabia que rosto desconhecido podia se parecer tanto com espelho do futuro. "Take a seat," she heard herself say before her brain caught up. "Anywhere you like." His eyes flicked up, surprised. "Ma'am, I don't have any money," he said quickly, shame coloring his cheeks under the grime. "I don't want no trouble for you." Patty reached for a menu, then stopped. "Why? Why pretend?" She waved her hand gently. "Don't worry about it," she said. "Sit down. I'll bring you a hot meal." He hesitated, then moved slowly to a booth near the back, the one closest to the restroom, as if automatically picking the least visible spot. The couple by the window whispered, shook their heads. The woman wrinkled her nose again, making a face. Patty's chest tightened. Rent, bills, food, her kids, her future. It all clashed in her mind at once. But another thought cut through like a whisper not entirely her own. "What more do you have to lose?" She turned toward the kitchen window. "Mario," she called softly, "make a chicken fried steak, extra gravy, mashed potatoes, green beans. Throw in a biscuit." Mario frowned. "On a ticket?" he asked. She shook her head. "Put it on mine." "You sure, Patty?" he said, lowering his voice. "That smell, customers gonna leave." As if on cue, the young couple stood up, the woman muttering, "This place is going downhill." They walked to the register, paid quickly, left a 50-cent tip, and rushed out, the bell above the door jingling sharply behind them. Patty watched them go, feeling the sting of the loss of even a few dollars. Then she took a breath. "Yeah," she said quietly. "I'm sure." While Mario cooked, the sizzling sound of the steak hitting the flat top filled the small kitchen, mingling with the hum of the fluorescent lights. The smell of frying meat, garlic, and pepper mixed with the ever-present odor of old oil and cleaning chemicals. But to Patty, it smelled like comfort, like childhood dinners at her grandma's house before everything got complicated. She poured a fresh cup of coffee for the man, added cream and 2 sugars automatically, then paused. She brought the sugar packets and creamers with her on a small tray. He sat hunched in the booth, hands folded in his lap, eyes on the table. Up close, the smell was stronger, a wall of human suffering and neglect that most people never encounter up close. Patty's eyes watered, but she forced her face to remain kind. She set the coffee down gently. The mug clinked softly on the worn laminate. "Here you go," she said. "You take cream and sugar?" He looked at the cup, then at her, as if she had handed him something rare and fragile. "However you take it is fine," he said. She smiled faintly. "You're the customer," she said. "Tonight, at least. You get it how you like it." He watched her tear open 2 sugar packets and pour them in, the white grains dissolving into the dark liquid as she stirred with a tiny metal spoon. The sound of the spoon clinking against the mug felt almost like a lullaby in the quiet diner. He wrapped his hands around the cup, fingers long and bony, nails dirty, knuckles scarred. He held it like one might hold a small fire on a cold night. He closed his eyes for a brief second, breathing in the steam. "Thank you," he said, voice soft. "You have no idea how good that smells." Patty swallowed. "Food's coming," she said. "What's your name?" He hesitated, then smiled a small, almost shy smile, as if the question itself was a gift he hadn't expected. "Folks used to call me Jay," he said. "Short for, well, doesn't matter much these days." "Nice to meet you, Jay," she said. "I'm Patty." His brown eyes searched her face for a moment, as if memorizing her features. "Nice to meet you, Patty," he said slowly, with a strange emphasis, like the words carried more weight than a simple greeting. "Não sabia que estranho podia pronunciar seu nome como uma oração." Mario rang the bell at the window. "Order up!" Patty hurried to grab the plate. The chicken-fried steak sat in the center, golden, crispy edges peeking out from under a generous layer of white gravy, flecked with black pepper. Beside it, a mound of mashed potatoes, another ladle of gravy pooling in the center, green beans glistening with a bit of butter, a biscuit on the side, still steaming. The plate was heavy in her hands, and not just in weight. She knew exactly how much this meal would cost, if rung up $12.99 before tax. Almost a third of her remaining cash, almost a third of the little envelope under the napkins. She set it down in front of him carefully. His eyes widened, and for a moment they shone with something like tears. His Adam's apple bobbed as he swallowed hard. "Ma'am," he said, voice thick, I don't know what to say." "Say grace if you want," she said softly, surprising herself. "That's what my grandma would tell people." He looked at the food, then bowed his head. His hands folded together over the edge of the table. Patty turned away to give him privacy. But from where she stood at the counter, she could still hear his low murmur. "Father, thank you," he whispered. "Bless the hands that prepared this. Bless the woman who showed kindness when she had every reason to turn away. Give her what she needs. More than she needs." The words pricked at the edges of her heart like pins. She busied herself wiping a clean spot again, her throat tightening. He began to eat slowly at first, as if savoring each bite, cutting small pieces of the steak, dipping them into the gravy, closing his eyes briefly as he chewed. Then hunger took over, and the pace quickened. He ate like a man who had indeed not seen a proper meal in days, maybe longer, but not so fast that he forgot to appreciate. Each forkful was almost a prayer. Patty found herself watching, leaning on the counter, forgetting for a moment the bills, the empty apartment, the one-check messages. There was something humbling and strange about seeing someone receive what she considered cheap diner food as if it were a feast. "Não sabia que prato de steak simples podia parecer banquete sagrado." As he ate, the diner felt different somehow. The buzzing neon seemed quieter, the ticking clock less urgent. The air, though still heavy with stale oil and disinfectant, felt charged with an invisible weight. He paused halfway through, wiped his mouth with the back of his hand, then caught himself and reached for the paper napkin instead, almost sheepish. He looked up at her. "Can I ask you something, Patty?" he said. She shrugged one shoulder, trying to look casual. "Sure, as long as it's not about the secret recipe for the gravy. Mario will kill me." He chuckled, a low, warm sound that did not match the roughness of his appearance. "Don't worry," he said. "I already know what's in it. A little flour, a little fat, and a lot of love." The word love sounded strange, spoken in this greasy, tired place at this hour. He tilted his head slightly. "Why'd you do it?" he asked. "Why'd you feed me when you knew I couldn't pay you back?" Patty blinked. The question hit her harder than she expected. She opened her mouth, then closed it. She thought of all the answers. Because I'm a sucker, because I'm desperate enough to try to buy God's attention, because I saw myself in you and it scared me. She shrugged again, but her voice came out softer than she had planned. Because I was raised to believe that hungry people should eat, she said. Because once upon a time, people helped me when they didn't have to. Because I'm tired of watching folks walk by and pretend not to see. He studied her, eyes steady. Even when it costs you? He asked quietly. Her gaze flicked instinctively to the envelope under the napkin dispenser. His eyes followed the movement, then returned to her face. She felt suddenly exposed, like he could see right through her tired uniform, through her skin, into her ledger of unpaid bills and unpaid hopes. Especially when it costs me, she said, surprising herself with the conviction in her voice. If it doesn't cost, it's not really love, right? He nodded slowly, a small smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. You'd be surprised how few people believe that anymore, he said. Most folks give what they don't miss. You gave me what you do miss. Her throat tightened again. She laughed, but there was no humor in it. Well, she said, if I'm being honest, it was my last. He raised his eyebrows slightly. Your last? He echoed. Last tips, she confessed. Last money. Got an eviction notice hanging over my head like one of those country songs where the woman loses everything but her Bible and her dog. He smiled gently. You still got the Bible? He asked. She snorted softly. Somewhere in a box, she said, between old pictures and things I haven't had the heart to throw away. Não sabia que admitir sua própria ruína podia soar tão leve na boca. He leaned forward slightly, elbows on the table, fingers interlaced. Tell me, he said, if you don't mind, how heavy is it on you right now? The question was too intimate for a stranger, too risky, but something in his eyes, steady, kind, unhurried, opened a door in her that no one had knocked on in a long time. She glanced around. The diner was empty now. Mario was in the back, doing dishes, humming a Spanish hymn under his breath. The street outside was quiet. The neon sign flickered, then steadied. It's heavy, she said. I'm 4 months behind on rent. Landlord gave me until tomorrow at 6. I got $38.75. That envelope you saw, that's it. No savings, no backup. I'm one shift away from... I don't even know. He listened without interrupting, his eyes never leaving her face. My husband left last year after 23 years, she went on, the words spilling faster now that they had started. Left a note on a napkin telling me the kids deserved better than my lack of progress. Took them. Put them in a fancy school. He's got a girlfriend with a new SUV. They live in a nicer neighborhood. I got the diner and the bills, and a lot of silence in an apartment that still has their pictures on the walls. A tear slipped down her cheek before she could wipe it away. Her hand trembled slightly as she reached for a napkin. She dabbed at her face, embarrassed. Sorry, she muttered. It's been a long day. He shook his head slowly. Don't be sorry, he said softly. You've been carrying a lot without crying. Tears are just the body's way of saying the heart is too full. The words were strange, almost poetic, yet spoken so simply. Não sabia que alguém podia descrever suas lágrimas como se fossem algo santo. He continued, voice low. And your kids? He asked. You still see them? She laughed bitterly. Not much, she said. Every time I try, there's an excuse. They're busy. They got practice. They got friends. Their dad says it's not a good weekend. Sometimes I send them messages. Sometimes they answer with one word. Sometimes just one grey check, sent but not delivered. That little grey check haunts me. She swallowed hard. I go into their rooms sometimes before my shift. I stand there in the dark. I look at their beds, Their posters, their clothes. I pray sometimes I yell, sometimes I just sit on the floor and stare. He nodded slowly, eyes glistening slightly. You love them very much, he said. She smirked through the tears. Sometimes I wish I didn't, she said. Would be easier, but I do, I always will. He picked up his fork again, took another slow bite, then set it down. You know, he said, you're not as invisible as you feel. She frowned slightly. What's that supposed to mean? She asked. He held her gaze. You think God doesn't see you? He said, voice still quiet but with a strange authority. You think heaven forgot this little town, this little diner, this tired waitress with $38.75 in an envelope and an eviction notice tacked to her fridge. You think your prayers bounce off the ceiling tiles and get lost in the smell of burnt coffee. But they don't. Her skin prickled. Goosebumps rose on her arms under the thin uniform. She hadn't told him she had prayed. She hadn't told him that she had just minutes earlier stared at those very ceiling tiles and whispered words to a God she wasn't sure was listening. Não sabia que estranho podia responder orações que você mal teve coragem de fazer. How do you know what I think? She asked, trying to sound skeptical but hearing the tremor in her own voice. He smiled, lines around his eyes deepening. Because I've walked through a lot of diners like this, he said. I've sat at a lot of empty booths. I've seen a lot of people at the end of their rope whispering to the ceiling, God, if you exist, do you see me? And I've seen what happens when they give what they can't afford to give. He picked up a piece of biscuit, broke it in half. Steam rose briefly, mingling with the faint smell of his clothes and the stronger smell of gravy. He offered half toward her across the table, like a strange, humble communion. Take it, he said. I insist. She hesitated, then reached out and took the warm, soft bread between her fingers. The simple act felt strangely weighty, like accepting more than just food. She took a small bite. Butter, flour, a pinch too much salt. Familiar, yet suddenly sacred. I don't have much, she said quietly, after swallowing, her voice barely above a whisper. But I guess I still have something to give. He nodded. You gave me a meal, he said. But you gave more than that. You gave me dignity. You gave me a seat at the table when others would have run me off. You saw me. The words echoed in her mind. You saw me. Não sabia que ver alguém podia ser ato tão poderoso quanto alimentar. He finished his plate slowly, wiping up the last of the gravy with the remaining biscuit, savoring every crumb. When he set his fork down for the final time, he sat back with a long exhale, eyes closing briefly, as if in deep satisfaction. That was the best meal I've had in a long time, he said. And Patty smiled weakly. It's just diner food, she said. He shook his head. Tonight it was more than that, he replied. He reached into his shirt pocket, pulled out something small wrapped in brown paper. He unfolded it carefully on the table. It was a simple, worn coin, not American, not something she recognized right away. The metal was dull, edges smooth from years of being handled. He slid it across the table toward her. For you, he said. She frowned, picked it up. It was heavier than it looked. On one side, there was an image worn almost flat by time. On the other, faint letters in a language she couldn't read. Around the rim, itself almost smoothed out, she could just make out the numbers 2540 scratched in by hand, like someone had taken a small tool and etched them in. What is this? She asked. He smiled softly. A reminder, he said, that nothing you give in love is ever really lost. That what you did tonight matters more than you know. Her fingers closed around the coin. It felt warm, as if it had been in sunlight, though it had come from his pocket in this fluorescent diner. And, he added, that someone sees. The way he said someone made her heart stutter. Não sabia que 4 números rabiscados em metal gasto podiam pesar mais do que uma carteira vazia. She slipped the coin into her apron pocket, more to end the strange intensity of the moment than out of understanding. "You don't have to pay me," she said quickly. "I told you, it's on me." He nodded. "I know," he said, "and I won't forget it." He stood slowly, stretching slightly, his back cracking audibly from too many nights on hard surfaces. He rolled his shoulders, then reached for his tattered coat draped over the booth. As he slid it on, the smell intensified for a second, nearly making her eyes water again. Yet beneath it, she caught a faint trace of something else, something clean, like rain on dry ground. He moved toward the door, then paused, turning back to her one last time. His eyes met hers and held them, deep brown and strangely bright. "Patty," he said, her name soft on his lips. "Tomorrow's not the end for you. It's the beginning of something you can't see yet." Her stomach flipped. "How do you know that?" she asked, half annoyed, half afraid. He smiled gently. "Because I know the one who writes the story," he said, "and he's not done with yours." He lifted a grimy hand, 2 fingers touching the brim of an invisible hat in a small, old-fashioned gesture of respect. "Thank you for the meal," he said. "You've done more tonight than feed a stranger." And then, almost like an afterthought, but with words that seemed to make the air in the diner thicken, he added, "What you did for the least, you did for me." The room seemed to tilt for a second. A shiver ran down her spine so strong she had to grab the counter to steady herself. The phrase struck some deep chord in her memory, like a bell that hadn't been rung in years, suddenly booming through a forgotten church. "What did you say?" she whispered, but the bell above the door jingled as he pushed it open. Cold night air rushed in, carrying the faint smell of rain and asphalt. She blinked, took a step forward. The neon glow painted his back red and blue as he stepped out onto the sidewalk. For a moment, his form was silhouetted against the glass. Then a pickup truck rumbled past, blocking her view for half a second. When it passed, he was gone. She rushed to the door, heart pounding, pushing it open so hard it banged against the wall. The parking lot was nearly empty. Just Mario's old Honda and her rusted sedan sat under the flickering light. The sidewalk stretched left and right. The street was quiet, no man, no shuffling steps, no figure turning the corner. Não sabia que alguém podia desaparecer tão rapidamente quanto uma esperança reacendida. She stepped outside, the chill October air prickling her skin through the thin uniform. She looked left, right, nothing. Her breath puffed in small clouds. "That's impossible," she murmured. "He was just here." She walked to the edge of the parking lot, peered into the shadows by the dumpster. No one. The night hummed with crickets and distant highway noise. After a minute, she gave up and went back inside, the bell chiming emptily above her. "Where'd your friend go?" Mario called from the kitchen, poking his head through the window. I don't know," Patty said slowly. "He left," Mario shrugged. "Weird," he said. "I didn't hear no car." Neither had she. She went back behind the counter, hand slipping into her apron pocket almost unconsciously. Her fingers touched the coin. It was still warm. She pulled it out and looked at it again under the harsh diner light. The scratched numbers were clearer now, 2540. Around them, the worn metal seemed to catch the light in a strange way, almost gleaming. 2540. Her mind flipped through the dusty pages of Sunday school memory. John 3:16, Psalm 23. Matthew something. There had been a verse, hadn't there? "Whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me." Matthew 25:40. Her knees went weak. She gripped the edge of the counter again, knuckles white. The clock ticked. The neon buzzed. Não sabia que números gravados em velho metal podiam ecoar tão forte quanto sermão inteiro. She slid the coin back into her pocket, as if hiding it could calm the storm inside. She finished closing duties on autopilot, wiping tables, flipping chairs, locking the door. Mario left with a wave and a "Buenas noches, Patty. See you tomorrow." Tomorrow, she echoed, the word tasting different now. She walked home through the quiet streets, the coin a small, solid weight against her hip. The town seemed more silent than usual, houses dark, porch lights casting small circles of safety on patchy lawns. Dogs barked in the distance. A lone truck rolled by, its headlights briefly washing her in white. Her apartment building loomed ahead, paint peeling, a light flickering in the hallway window. She climbed the stairs, key ringing softly as it turned in the lock. The apartment smelled faintly of microwave dinners and old coffee. She dropped her keys in the bowl by the door, tossed her bag onto the sagging couch, and stood in the silence. She went to the fridge. The eviction notice was magneted to the door, the red letters screaming quietly. Final notice. Pay by October 31st, 6 p.m., or vacate. She stared at it for a long moment, then reached into her apron and pulled out the coin again. She held it up, next to the notice. Red ink. Worn metal, threat and promise side by side. She whispered, "If you're out there, if that meant anything, I need you tomorrow, because I got nothing." Her voice broke on the last word. She slid down to the kitchen floor, back against the cabinet, knees pulled up, the coin resting in her open palm. For the first time in a long time, she cried without trying to stop herself. Big, hot tears rolled down her cheeks, dripping onto her apron, onto the coin. Solozos incontroláveis shook her thin frame as the dam finally broke. Não sabia que coração cansado podia ainda encontrar lágrimas escondidas tão fundo. She eventually stumbled to bed, the coin under her pillow like a secret talisman, though she'd always been told not to believe in such things. She fell asleep mid-prayer, words blurring into dreams. Morning came too early. The alarm on her cracked phone buzzed at 5:30 a.m. She groaned, rolled over, slapped it off. The apartment felt colder than usual, the thin walls doing little to keep the October chill out. She dragged herself to the bathroom, turned the shower knob out of habit. The water, as always, came out cold. The tiny water heater in the closet had died months ago with a sad pop and a wisp of smoke. She had never had the money to fix it. She stepped under the stream, gasping as icy drops hit her skin. Her breath came in sharp little bursts, but after a minute, her body adjusted, going numb enough to endure. The water ran over her head, down her face, mingling with the remnants of her tears from the night before. "God," she whispered, water dripping down her nose, her voice barely audible over the hiss of the shower. "About last night, was that you? Was that man? No, of course it wasn't. That would be crazy, right?" She turned the water off, air cold against her wet skin, grabbed a towel. "But if it was in some way, a sign, then I need you to show up today. I need a miracle. I got till 6 p.m. and I got 38.75. The coin lay on the bathroom counter where she had placed it when she undressed. She picked it up, thumb rubbing the scratched numbers almost nervously. "I don't even know how to pray right anymore," she admitted. "But please." Não sabia que falar com o teto gelado do banheiro podia, pouco a pouco, voltar a parecer falar com alguém. She made coffee with the last of the grounds from the can, thin and bitter, but hot. She skipped breakfast to save what little food was left. She dressed in the same uniform, washed and faded, repairing a loose button with shaking fingers. Before leaving, she stepped into Danny's room. The morning light filtered through the thin curtains, painting dust motes in the air. His bed was made, the comforter smoothed the way she had done it the last time she'd cleaned, unable to stop herself. His guitar leaned in a corner, a thin layer of dust on the strings. She sat on the edge of his bed, the mattress sagging slightly. She ran her fingers lightly over the guitar's neck. "I miss you," she whispered. I miss you so much, baby." She waited, listening, as if expecting an answer. The silence answered instead. Then she went to Sophie's room. Sketches still covered the walls. Eyes, cities, angels, a girl standing in the rain with her face turned upward. She traced a finger over the pencil lines. "I miss you too," she said. Her phone buzzed. A new message. Her heart leapt, but when she checked, it was a reminder from the utility company about her overdue electric bill. "Não sabia que simples bip de celular podia decepcionar tanto todas as manhãs." She tucked the coin into her pocket, grabbed her bag, and left for the diner. The morning rush was thin. A few regulars came in for coffee and eggs, left small tips. A couple of construction workers, a tired nurse, a man in a suit who kept checking his watch. Patty moved through it all in a fog, the weight of the 6 p.m. deadline pressing on her chest like a physical thing. Around 9:45 a.m., the diner had a rare lull. Only one customer sat at the counter, an older woman stirring sugar into her coffee, eyes on the local paper. Mario hummed another hymn in the kitchen. The bell above the door chimed. Patty turned, expecting another regular. Instead, a man in a perfectly tailored dark blue suit stepped in. He looked like he had walked out of a different world. Sleek black shoes polished to a shine, white shirt crisp, tie knotted just so. His salt and pepper hair was trimmed neatly, his jaw clean-shaven. He carried a leather briefcase in one hand and removed a pair of sunglasses with the other, revealing sharp blue eyes that took in the diner with one sweep. He seemed so out of place in the faded red booths and greasy air that for a second Patty wondered if he had taken a wrong turn on the highway. He approached the counter with confident, measured steps. Patty noticed the stitching on his suit, bespoke, not off the rack. The watch on his wrist glinted with understated luxury. He smelled faintly of expensive cologne, like cedar and citrus, cutting through the ever-present scent of coffee and oil. "Morning," he said, voice warm, with a hint of something that sounded like money and decisions. "You, Patty?" She blinked. Yeah," she said slowly, glancing at her name tag to make sure she was, in fact, still Patty. He smiled. "Good," he said. "My name's Ed Salazar." He extended a hand across the counter. She hesitated, then shook it. His grip was firm, his palm smooth, hands that wrote checks rather than washed dishes. Não sabia que aperto de mão podia carregar tanto mistério e promessa ao mesmo tempo. "What can I get you, Mr. Salazar?" she asked, slipping back into waitress mode out of habit. "Coffee? Breakfast?" He chuckled. "Maybe in a minute," he said. "But I'm actually here to talk about you, not about food." Her stomach dropped. "If this is about me switching my phone plan or buying some fancy insurance, I'm afraid—" He shook his head quickly. "No, ma'am," he said. "I'm not selling you anything. I'm here because I heard about you." Her frown deepened. "Heard about me?" she repeated. "From who?" He glanced around the diner, eyes lingering briefly on the faded "Since 1954" sign. "You mind if I sit?" he asked. "This might take more than a minute." She hesitated, then nodded toward the counter stool opposite her. "Sure," she said. "Have a seat." He sat, set his briefcase gently on the stool beside him, and folded his hands on the counter. "First, coffee would be great," he said with a small smile. "Black." She poured from the fresh pot, the rich aroma filling the space between them. As she set the mug down, his eyes flicked to her apron pocket, where, though unseen, the coin rested. "I own a small group of businesses," he began. "Mostly in service industries, cafes, diners, a couple of boutique hotels. Ed Salazar Enterprises. Maybe you've heard of it." She had not. She shook her head, embarrassed. He grinned. "That's all right," he said. "We're not exactly McDonald's, but around this part of Texas we're doing all right." He took a sip of coffee, nodded in approval, then leaned forward slightly. "Yesterday," he said, "around 11 at night, Did you, by any chance, feed a homeless man who couldn't pay?" Her heart stopped for a beat. Her hand tightened around the coffee pot's handle. She stammered. "We have all kinds of folks coming through here. I don't always remember." He raised a hand gently. "I'm not here to get you in trouble," he said quickly. "Opposite, actually. Let me rephrase. Did you give a meal to a man who smelled pretty bad, who others tried to avoid, and who told you he couldn't pay a cent?" She exhaled slowly. "Yes," she said. "I did." "Did you pay for it yourself?" he asked. She nodded. "Out of your last tips?" he asked, eyes searching her face. Her breath caught. Who told you that?" she whispered. "Não sabia que desconhecido elegante podia saber detalhes tão íntimos de sua noite mais difícil." Ed set his mug down carefully, the clink loud in the sudden quiet. "Last night," he said, "I was at home, going through some paperwork. I have a lot of properties in smaller towns. I'm looking into consolidating, maybe investing in some places that are about to go under but still have heart." He chuckled softly. "Anyway, I went to bed late, and I don't know what you'd call it. I'm not the kind of guy who usually talks like this, but I had what I can only describe as a vision, a dream that felt more real than my own hands." Patty swallowed hard. The diner seemed to fade around them. "I saw a diner," he continued, gesturing around. "Looked a whole lot like this one. I saw a woman in a tired uniform, wiping a counter. I saw her reach under a napkin dispenser, take out an envelope and look at what was inside with the kind of fear you can't fake. $38 and change. I saw a man walk in, homeless, dirty, smelling like the street. I saw her choose to feed him anyway, knowing it was her last. His eyes met hers, steady, and I heard a voice, clear as anything, say, 'You see this? This is the kind of heart I can build on. What she did for the least of these, she did for me.'" The coin in her pocket seemed to grow heavier with each word. Não sabia que sonho de outra pessoa podia repetir, palavra por palavra, o eco de uma voz que você ouviu na noite anterior. Ed took a deep breath. "I woke up shaken," he said. "I don't usually have spiritual experiences. I go to church, I give, but I'm a businessman. I think in numbers, but I couldn't shake it. So I prayed. God, if that was from you, show me who she is." He reached down to his briefcase, popped it open, and pulled out a small stack of papers. He slid one across the counter. It was a printout from a local property listing site. At the top, "Commercial property, former Jack's family diner building, for sale." The date was yesterday. "I found out this building went on the market last week," he said. "Owner's getting older, tired. The place hasn't been turning a profit for a while. They're asking $240,000 for the building and land." Patty's head spun. She gripped the counter to steady herself. "I drove down here first thing," he continued. "Met with the owner, with your landlord, Mr. Barnes. Nice man. Loyal. He's in a tight spot too with the bank. We talked numbers, and 30 minutes ago I signed the papers." He slid another paper toward her, a sales agreement with signatures already on it. "As of noon today," he said, glancing at his watch, "Ed Salazar Enterprises owns this building." The floor seemed to drop out from under her. You bought the diner," she whispered. He nodded. "Cash," he said. $240,000. Paid in full. Não sabia que alguém podia falar em centenas de milhares de dólares enquanto você contava moedas no bolso. Her first instinct was fear. "So you're shutting us down," she said, voice hollow. "That's why you're here, to tell us we're done." He shook his head firmly. "No," he said. "I'm here with a job offer." She stared, not daring to hope. "I need someone who knows this town, knows this diner, and more importantly, knows how to treat people like they matter," he said. "I can teach systems, menus, branding. I can't teach heart, that you either have or you don't. and from what I saw, you do." He leaned forward. "I want you to stay, not as a tired waitress barely scraping by, but as the manager. I want to renovate this place, rebrand it, make it shine again, and I want you at the helm." Her mouth opened, closed. "Mr. Salazar, I've never been a manager," she stammered. "I barely keep my own life together. You're just the kind of person I want," he interrupted gently but firmly. "The ones who know what it is to struggle, the ones who know what it is to need a meal, the ones who understand that customers aren't just dollar signs, they're souls." His words rang oddly familiar to her, like something her grandma might have said if she had been a CEO. "What would that even look like?" she whispered. He smiled. $6,000 a month, he said, naming a number that made her head spin. "Salary, not including bonuses and profit share once we get these places really humming. Full health benefits, paid time off, and training to help you grow into the role. $6,000 a month." Não sabia que número podia soar como trovão de libertação na mente de alguém endividado. "Wait," she said, holding up a hand, as if to physically stop the onslaught of goodness. "Why me? You don't know me. I'm behind on rent. My life's a mess. I fed one homeless man. That doesn't make me some kind of hero." Ed's eyes softened. "You think last night was the first time you've done something like that?" he asked. "From what I've heard." He jerked his head toward the corner booth where Mr. Harris now sat, watching with open curiosity. "You've been doing that for years in small ways. Free coffee, extra bread, sitting with people who had no one." Mr. Harris nodded slowly, chiming in. "She prayed with my wife when she was dying," he said. "On her break. Didn't know us from Adam, but she sat and held her hand. Brought soup from the kitchen. Wouldn't take a penny for it." Patty blinked back fresh tears. "And beyond that," Ed continued, "I heard from someone else. Someone whose opinion I value more than any reference letter." He reached into his inner jacket pocket and pulled out a small envelope, cream-colored, unmarked. He slid it toward her. "A man came to my office building early this morning," he said. "Before I left, security said he looked rough. They were about to turn him away, but he asked for me by name, said he had a recommendation." Patty's heart thudded. Her fingers tingled as she reached for the envelope. "He wouldn't come inside," Ed went on. "Said he had places to be. But he handed this to my assistant and said, 'Give this to Ed. Tell him that's her.' Then he left. By the time I went out to meet him, he was gone. No name. No forwarding address. Não sabia que envelope simples podia pesar como uma revelação inteira." Her fingers trembled as she opened it. Inside was a folded napkin, a diner napkin. On it, in careful handwriting, were the words, "She gave me her last tips to feed a stranger. She treated me like a king when others treated me like a problem. Trust her. Matthew 25:40. Underneath, a single initial, J. Patty's vision blurred with tears. Her throat closed. The room spun again. She remembered the words from last night. "What you did for the least, you did for me." She remembered the coin, the scratched numbers, the warm metal, the way he had looked at her, seeing, knowing. Her knees buckled. If the counter hadn't been there, she might have fallen. A sob escaped her lips, half laugh, half cry. Riso e choro misturados em som que encheu o pequeno restaurante. Não sabia que a mesma mesa onde você serviu prato podia se transformar no altar de milagre. Ed stood quickly, worried. "Patty, hey, you okay?" he asked. She nodded, though tears streamed down her face unchecked. I fed a man last night," she managed. He left me a coin. It had 25.40 scratched on it. I thought I was losing my mind. And now this, and she reached into her pocket, pulled out the coin, slammed it gently onto the counter. Ed picked it up, eyes widening as he saw the numbers. "Matthew 25:40, he whispered. "Truly I tell you, Whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me." The verse hung in the greasy air like incense in a cathedral. Não sabia que versículo que você decorou criança podia dia ganhar carne e osso diante de você. Ed looked back at her, something like awe in his eyes. "Patty," he said softly, "I don't pretend to understand everything that's going on here. But I know this. I've seen a lot of deals in my life, a lot of contracts, a lot of numbers. And I've never been more sure of anything than I am that I'm supposed to do this." He pulled out his phone, tapped a few buttons, then turned the screen toward her. It showed a banking app, a transfer screen. "I talked to Mr. Barnes after I signed the property papers," he said. "He told me about your situation, about how you're behind on rent, how he hated to push you out, but felt like he had no choice. I asked for your account info. He was hesitant, but let's just say things worked out." He tapped confirm. "There," he said, $3,000 sent. Should hit your account within the hour. That'll cover your back rent and give you some breathing room." $3,000. The number was too big for her tired, scarcity-trained brain to process. Her hand flew to her mouth as another sob escaped. Solozos incontroláveis, agora misturados com incredulidade quase alegre. Não sabia que podia chorar de alívio tão violentamente quanto chorou de desespero. "Why?" she whispered. "Why would you do that?" Ed smiled, eyes shining. "Because someone fed me when I was hungry once too," he said. "Not with food, with mercy, and because last night you fed him." He gestured toward the ceiling in a way that somehow felt less like religion and more like reality. "And because," he added, "I have this strong sense we're just getting started." Throughout the rest of the morning, word spread like wildfire through the small town. Barns, diners, barbershops, church groups, everyone heard some version of the story, though each telling twisted the details slightly. A tired waitress fed a homeless man her last tips, and the next day a rich businessman bought the diner. A stranger showed up with a message from God. Jesus himself walked in disguised as a bum. Não sabia que uma ação escondida podia virar assunto da cidade inteira em menos de dia. Customers began to trickle in, then stream in. Regulars who had been coming for years, new faces from the edge of town, folks who usually ate at the chain burger place. They filled the booths, lined the counter, ordered coffee and eggs and pancakes, but more than that they asked, "Is it true? Did something happen here last night?" Patty moved among them, still half in a daze, telling pieces of the story when she could, pointing to the coin she now wore on a simple chain around her neck. Some people listened with wide eyes, some nodded thoughtfully, some smirked skeptically, but all left different than they came. That Sunday, Patty did something she hadn't done in a long time. She went to church, the small white-steepled building on the edge of town where she had been baptized as a teenager, still stood. The paint was peeling a bit more, but the bell still rang at 10 a.m. She slipped into a back pew, head down, hoping not to be noticed, but people turned. Whispers rose and fell. There she is. That's her. The waitress from the diner. The pastor, a middle-aged man with kind eyes and a bit of a belly from too many potlucks, stepped up to the pulpit with a Bible in his hand. He smiled as he opened it. "Today," he said, "we're going to talk about Matthew 25:4. The coincidence was too much to be coincidence. Não sabia que versículo que você viu num metal velho ia se tornar o sermão inteiro da manhã seguinte. The pastor read, "The king will reply, 'Truly I tell you, whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me.'" Patty gripped the back of the pew in front of her, knuckles white. Tears slipped down her cheeks silently. The pastor continued, "Sometimes the stranger you feed is Jesus in disguise. Sometimes the person you think is taking from you is the one heaven uses to give to you. Sometimes the miracle isn't in the money that shows up the next day, but in the heart that chooses to give when it has nothing. His eyes swept the congregation, then paused, landing directly on Patty in the back row. Their gazes met. He smiled gently. And sometimes, he added, the miracle is in a tired waitress who, with her last $38.75, chooses to treat a stranger like a king. The sanctuary felt heavy, with a holy hush. A few people sniffled. A baby fussed somewhere. The old ceiling fan squeaked. Não sabia que seu dia de maior vergonha e maior medo podia se transformar no testemunho que alimenta a fé de uma cidade inteira. After the service, people came up to her, hugs and handshakes and "I'm sorry we didn't see you sooner," mingling in the air. Some shared stories of their own chances to help, chances missed or taken. Patty felt overwhelmed, but underneath the flood of attention was a growing, quiet peace. She went home that afternoon, stood in her kitchen, and looked once more at the fridge. The eviction notice was gone. In its place, she pinned a small index card where she had written in shaky letters, Matthew 25:40. Days turned into weeks. Renovations began on the diner, new booths, fresh paint, updated kitchen equipment, a repaired neon sign that now shone bright and steady. The name changed slightly. King's Table Diner. The old sign since 1954 was kept, but a new phrase was added beneath it in smaller letters, what you did for the least of these. Ed opened not just this diner, but planned 4 more in nearby towns, all under the same brand, all with the same mission. Serve food, serve dignity, serve Jesus in disguise, whether he came in a suit or in rags. He kept his promise. Patty became the manager, learning how to do schedules, inventory, leadership. At first, the responsibility terrified her, but with training, patience, and a lot of prayer, she grew into the role. Her back still ached at the end of long days, but now there was a different kind of tired in her bones, the kind that comes from purpose, not just survival. Every Saturday, she instituted a tradition. From 2 p.m. to 4 p.m., anyone who came in clearly in need, a homeless person, a struggling family, someone down on their luck, could get a hot meal free, no questions asked. She called it Jesus Hour, though the official sign said community meal. Sometimes the line stretched out the door. Men with shopping carts, women with kids in tow, teenagers who had run away, old veterans with far-off eyes. Patty would stand at the door, greet each one, look them in the eyes and say, "Welcome, you're not a problem here. You're a guest of honor." Não sabia que abrir uma janela de 2 horas por semana podia abrir também uma porta enorme para o céu e invadir seu pequeno restaurante. Word spread beyond the town. A local Christian radio station did a segment. A regional news outlet wrote an article. Tired waitress pays for stranger's meal with her last tips and everything changes. The comments online were filled with people saying, "I needed this. God still moves. Maybe I should look for Jesus in the least of these too." One day, months later, as Patty stood behind the counter during a lull, refilling salt shakers, her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "Hey, Mom, it's Danny. Can me and Sophie come by the diner after school? We heard about what you're doing. Kind of proud of you." Her knees almost gave out all over again. She quickly typed back, fingers trembling. "Yes, please, I'll be here." Later that afternoon, the door opened, and there they were, taller, older, different, yet still hers. Danny with his guitar case slung over his back, Sophie with a sketchbook under her arm. They hesitated in the doorway. Then Danny grinned sheepishly. "Hey, Mum," he said. Sophie's eyes glistened. "Hey," she echoed. Patty didn't say a word at first. She just walked around the counter and wrapped them both in her arms, squeezing so tight they laughed. Tears dripped onto their shoulders. Riso e choro misturados novamente, mas dessa vez cheios de esperança. Não sabia que o som da palavra mom na boca de um filho distante podia curar rachaduras anos abertas no coração. Over time, their relationship slowly mended. Danny started playing guitar on Friday nights at the diner, soft background music for the dinner crowd. Sophie painted a mural on one of the walls, a scene of a table laden with food, chairs occupied by people of all kinds, with a figure at the head whose face was somehow familiar and yet unrecognizable, light radiating from him. One evening, as Patty closed up, Ed lingered at the counter sipping decaf. They watched the last customer leave, the bell chiming gently. "You know," he said, "I still wonder sometimes about that man, the one who started all this, whether he was just a guy down on his luck or something more." Patty reached up, fingers brushing the coin that still hung around her neck. It glinted softly in the low light. "I don't think those two things are as separate as we think," she said quietly. "Maybe he was both. Maybe he still is both, hungry and holy, poor and king." Ed nodded slowly. "Jesus in disguise," he murmured. She smiled. "Jesus in every disguise," she corrected. "We just gotta have eyes to see." Não sabia que, ao olhar para cada rosto cansado que entra pela porta, você estaria, na verdade, procurando o próprio Senhor. That night, back at home, Patty knelt by her bed. Not because things were perfect, but because they were held. She spoke into the quiet, not to the ceiling this time, but to someone she now knew had been listening all along. "Thank you," she whispered, "for showing up in a homeless man, for showing up in a businessman's dream, for showing up in a verse I memorized when I was 10 and lived when I was 47, for my kids, for this diner, for every stranger who walks in." Her eyes closed, hands clasped. The coin rested against her chest, cool and firm. "And help me," she added, "never to miss you when you come dressed as the least of these." Somewhere deep inside, in a place beyond words, she sensed a smile, a presence, a whisper. "What you did for the least of these, you did for me." Matthew 25:40. "What you did for the least of these, you did for me." Matthew 25:40. "Whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me." Matthew 25:40. "Every plate you served, every cup of coffee you poured for the forgotten, you poured for me." Matthew 25:40. "When you gave your last tips to feed a stranger, you placed an offering on my table." Matthew 25:40. "For whoever is kind to the poor lends to the Lord, and he will reward them for what they have done." Proverbs 19:17. "For pure and undefiled religion before God, the Father is this, to look after orphans and widows in their distress, and to keep oneself unstained by the world." James 1:27. This story is inspired by the true biblical principle of Matthew 25:40, but it is not a literal retelling. It is a reminder that every act of kindness to the least of these is an act of worship to Jesus himself. If this story touched you, like the video and share it with someone who needs hope today. Comment your prayer request below so we can pray for you by name. Subscribe. We're on the road to 40K souls in this community. Share your city and your miracle in the comments. Let this video keep playing in your home as a background of blessing. Many testify that the atmosphere changes. Add this to your Jesus in Disguise playlist and come back whenever you feel invisible, forgotten, or tired. Because in every small town, in every diner, in every heart that chooses to give when it has nothing left, he is still there,